order. Will you call roll, please?
Sure, good evening. Chairman Baugh,
Here?
Vice Chairman Dibble,
Here.
Commissioner Schrader is absent, Commissioner Zarguni,
Here.
Commissioner Miller,
Here.
Commissioner York,
Here.
Commissioner Gonzalez is absent, Commissioner Mandel is absent, and Commissioner Salazar Garza.
Here.
Quorum established.
Thank you. At this time, we will open the public comment section. If you have to speak on a specific item, please hold your comments until we address that item. Is there anybody wishing to speak on a generic item at this time? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing portion for that and move on to absences. Do we have a motion to approve the absence of Commissioner Gonzalez?
I'll make a motion, we approve the absence.
Do we have a second?
I second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Moving on to approval of minutes. Are there any questions, comments, or a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make a motion, we approve the minutes as presented.
Second. All right, I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Moving on to item 2, the public hearing for the budget presentation.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Camille Terrace for the Office of Management and Budget. First, I'm going to present a amendment. 2 weeks ago, I brought the initial original CIP for fiscal year 22. We had, in the 2 weeks' time, there were some executive and staff amendments, so I'll go over those. Hopefully, you received the email from Andrew yesterday with the project pages and the presentation. Basically, I'll just go over that presentation with you, give you, what's changing verbally, and then I will request, if you're comfortable with it, a vote to amend the original budget that was presented to you, and then approve as amended and recommend to City Council. Okay? So starting, the original budget that was presented to you 2 weeks ago was $444.9 million. We had changes that added up to additional $4 million. So the amended proposed budget for fiscal year 22 is now at $448.9 million. Let's start with Parks and Rec. So Parks and Rec, there is no actual change to the budget. The only thing that changed was the Gate Lozano Golf Course project initially had funding of $500,000 over 2 years from the Type B sales tax. We revised that to change that to certificates of obligation. Type B board wants more information on the project, so to not slow down the project, we want to start with the certificates, and if they choose to fund it again, we'll make an amendment for either for next year or the following year to add their contribution to the project. Going to public facilities, we have one additional project and two budget and scheduling adjustments. So for year one, it is a decrease of $2.25 million and an increase of $7.2 million for year two. The first project is an addition, is a City Hall window replacement. The project is scheduled for design in 22 and then construction in 23, so $500,000 for design and engineering and administration costs in 22, and then $4.232 million for year two, fiscal year 23, funded with certificate of obligation. This project is to make repairs to the framing and sealant of all the windows in City Hall after the recent rain events. We have some flooding that was identified, so we need to make some repairs to keep the building in good condition. Moving on, this is a scheduling adjustment. The American Bank Center parking lot project was initially scheduled to be designed and constructed in 22. After further discussion, it was determined that we're going to do the design of $400,000 in next year in fiscal year 22, and then the construction of $3 million in 23. So it's an adjustment of the budget. The total project budget is not changing, just spread over 2 years instead of one, but it is a decrease of $3 million for fiscal year 22. Moving on to the American Bank Center major building upgrades, the original project was for $1 million for fiscal year '22. After further discussion, there were additional upgrades that needed to happen at the convention center side of the American Bank Center, so additional $250,000 HUD funding was added to address those concerns at the convention center. Moving on to stormwater, year one is an increase of $6.6 million. Year two is an increase of 5.6. There's going to be one additional project and a budget addition for another one. So the additional new project is the stormwater crew quarter building, crew quarters building of $1.64 million. This is to design and build a modular building complex of around 5,000 square feet to house the city stormwater operations. The current facilities are not sufficient to hold the staff that we currently have and want to hire to, increase the stormwater operations. So we need additional facility. Moving on, the next project is a addition to the budget. So initially, the budget was $6 million for citywide infrastructure. It was determined that there is capacity to add another $5.5 million in revenue on top of the American Rescue Act funding to increase the rehabilitation efforts of the stormwater system throughout the city. So we added those for year 2 and 3. So moving on to water. In water, we have a decrease of a little bit over $300,000 in year 1, an increase of $11.1 million in year 2, and an increase of $9.9 million in year 3. We're proposing to add 2 additional projects, a schedule adjustment for one project, which is the elevated storage tanks, and removal of the master plan from the short range and moving it into long range. So we're not completely removing, just for scheduling purposes, we're moving it out of the first 3 years. The new additional project is the Owen Stevens Water Treatment Plant security upgrades of $600,000 for fiscal year 22, funded with revenue bonds. This is to upgrade the fencing around the facility and install additional cameras to protect the plant, and $600,000 for next year. Moving on to the second new project, which is the Flower Bluff 18-inch water line extension. This is a project over 3 years, so fiscal year 22, 23, 24. Projected cost of $12.6 million, and this is to extend a water line that is running by on Laguna Shores and connecting it to the transmission main that is running on the Flower Bluff. It's 12,000 linear feet pipe that is proposed to be designed and then installed in 22 and 23. We have a scheduling adjustment for the elevated storage tanks. Initially, it was proposed to add to have it over 2 years with $7 million in year 1 and $4 million in year 2. After further review and the scheduling, it was determined that it will be a decrease in year 2 and 3, and then a decrease in year 1, a slight increase of $1 million in year 2, and then we added $5 million to continue the build of the new elevated water tanks in year 3 of a little bit over $5 million. And then, as I mentioned, the water supply master plan was moved out of the short range and moved into the long range, so it's a decrease of $450,000 to the overall budget. And that basically goes over the amendments, and I'm open for any questions.
Thank you. At this time, do any commissioners have any questions regarding the amendment portion? Are you looking for an approval of the amendments, and then we go to questions about the capital improvement itself?
Yes.
Okay.
First, let's approve these amendments, and then we can discuss the full total, and then if you're comfortable, then we'll vote on the recommendation to City Council.
Thank you. Do we have any comments on the amendments or an approval to, or a motion to approve?
I move we approve the amendments as presented.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
All in favor, say aye.
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 The amendment passes and is part of the CIP. All right, at this time, do we have any comments or questions regarding the CIP booklet that we've been giving? Any parts or any questions? Now, please let me know. I do not have any questions. It was well put together like it always is and has very, very good delineation of the funds, so.
Thank you very much.
Anybody else at this time? If not, do we open this for public hearing? But,
You can.
okay. At this time, we will open the public hearing to comment on the capital improvement budget for 2021 through 2022. Does anybody wish to comment? Seeing none, we will close the public hearing and entertain a motion to recommend to City Council.
I'll make a recommendation that, to approve the capital, improvement plan with the amendments, to go to city council.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Moving on to the consent public hearing item.
Permission to proceed?
Yes, sir.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The commission, for the record, David Stallworth, Senior Planner, and I'd like to introduce item number 6, consent public hearing, as read into the record by the commission chair. We have on today's docket, or this evening's docket, actually, 6 total items, 2 of which are final plats, 1 replat, 1 request for a time extension, and 2 waivers, which I'm going to read as follows. The first being a final plat request, 21 PL 1051, the final plat of Yorktown Heights, consisting of 9.15 acres. Request number 2, 21 PL 1066, Rancho Vista subdivision, final plat, Unit 24, consisting of 13.30 acres. Request number 3, case number 21 PL 1074, El Rey Addition, Block 6, Lot 16A. It's a replat consisting of .065 acres. Request number 4, case number 19 PL 1084. It's a time extension request for Turtle Cove Center, Unit 2, Block 1, Lot 7R, R1 replat, consisting of 5.22 acres. 2 waivers, and the first one being case number 21 PL 1060, Flower Heights, Block 1, Lot 24, consisting of .55 acres. And the last request is case number 21 PL 1060, a sidewalk waiver request for Flower Heights, Block 1, Lot 24, consisting of .55 acres. All of them have been deemed technically sound and are on consent agenda. There is considerable comment regarding Yorktown Heights Final 1, then much of the audience is here to go and discuss that. As soon as, I guess, their comments are addressed, then I can read some other comments that have been given to me to read into the record as well,
Thank
at
you
your
very
leisure.
much. At this time, do any commissioners have any questions regarding items 3 through 8 on the agenda? Seeing none, we will open the public hearing for items 3 through 8. If there is an owner representing any of these items, we typically let them speak first. If not, then everybody else may speak. We have a 3-minute timeline, but before I open that, Mr. Buck, can you explain on the plats what our obligation is, with what our options are when it comes to approving, denying, amending, or anything of that sort?
So for plats, the planning commission's role is administrative. Essentially, if the plat meets the legal requirements of the city code and state law, then it's the duty of the planning commission to approve.
And all those items are approved prior to being placed on the agenda?
All these items are reviewed by staff, and I believe we include a recommendation that they do comply with city code and state law.
Okay, thank you, sir. All right, at this time, I will open the public hearing. Please address the podium and state your name and address, and feel free to make a comment.
Good evening. My name is David Gerlach. I live at 581 Yorktown Boulevard, and I like the way you took culpability off the Planning Commission with that comment. So my opposition is based off of, obviously, the naval base's density recommendations. First of all, the vice chairman himself, Mr. Dibble, stated that if it's in an APZ, then we go by the Navy's recommendations concerning the property that was platted on Flower Bluff Drive. So I don't see how it's any different that you would apply the same logic to this proposed development. As a matter of fact, the 2009 Joint Land Use Study, the Navy specifically recommended this particular property to the council be rezoned in that study. And one council after another dropped the ball on it and didn't replat it as or rezone it as as RE and left it RS6. You can't tell me that this developer spent $600,000, didn't call development services, so either development services is incompetent or didn't care, because anybody down there should have been familiar with the Joint Land Use Survey, picked up the phone, said, hey, Ben Pollock, is the Navy base going to have any objections to this? The Navy would have said, why, yes, we do, because if you go back and look at their maps, their flight path coming off the 13 runway is 83% of the flights. That's 70,000 sorties a year. They come off that airfield at about 250 feet AGL above ground level and bank hard right, exactly dead center over where this proposed development is. The last Class 1 aircraft crash they had was right across the street from this proposed property. Now, I understand you have an administrative duty to approve the plat if there's nothing illegal against it. But if you go into the platting and zoning recommendations, the general welfare of the future lot owners in the subdivision and community at large is your responsibility to pay attention to. That's under General 9.034 IB2, private provisions. So the conditions basically lay out that it's on the developer. The onus is on the developer to prove that he is developing this property in the best benefit of the general public. So the Navy spent $1 million or so on the Joint Land Use Survey, giving you guys this information based off the Naval Department's risk analysis that densities at 1 to 2 acres is an acceptable risk this close to the airfield. Densities above that present too high of a risk and could potentially impact future operations of the Naval Air Station. BRAC commissions tend to look at those kinds of things when they realign bases and shut them down. They'll put all these things in a column and go, well, you already built Carroll High School. Oh, no, we built it outside of the APZ. The APZ study that was current, even though you guys in the city council knew that the new one was going to encompass that Carroll High School. The property on Flower Bluff Drive, same thing. Well, we can't really do anything about this because we need this development because Mr. Smith's family is involved in the port, so we're going to go ahead and slide this on through. Navy objected again to that. I know for a fact, after speaking to Mr. Pollock, the Navy did not want this type of density on this property. That doesn't really matter because those are recommendations the Naval Base makes. But you did incorporate this into the plan.
Continue your comments.
Okay, into the plan. The planning, you guys actually, Planning Commission developed Planned Comprehensive CC, which lays out in here that Section 4 of Plan CC Goals and Strategies adopt appropriate regulations consistent with the recommendations of the Joint Land Use Study. Additionally, consider the compatibility of proposed uses with military airfield operations. Number 3, avoid development that is incompatible with the operation of military airfields and airports. The Navy gave you those compatibility guidelines in the studies that they spent a lot of money on. And then if you drill down into the detailed Flower Bluff Comprehensive Plan, which was most recently passed June 22nd, which all of you also were a part of, you in fact also stated that the goal was to encourage development that's compatible with the Naval Air Station in Waldron Field by maintaining land use designations consistent with air installations compatible zones. So essentially, the city put together Plan CC, you put together the comprehensive Flower Bluff plan, and if you allow this proposed plat to go through as it stands, you're contradicting everything that your own studies say that is for the long-term benefit and growth of Corpus Christi and Flower Bluff in particular, more importantly, the naval base's longevity. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else wishing to speak?
My name is Danny Goki, 500 Yorktown. I actually own half of the property that joins up to this. I have the 30-foot road that comes in beside it and 660 feet across the back, and the road is 600 foot on the side. And we've never had much problem with flooding except in our field, but not from runoff from this. But since they've cleared it, I don't know if they've leveled it, but these last 2 rains now, this place is flooded. And the gentleman up here that's got the 1 acre in the house on the corner, his actual yard got plumb flooded up to the lawnmower engine in the backyard coming across our road into the property. And when I called down to tell them there was an issue with the flooding problem, and if they put what they're talking about in there, they're going to have probably 60 to 75% of that covered with cement and road, with these smaller houses and driveways and the roads coming in. So that water that's actually soaking in the ground now is going to be even flowing off even more. And it's going to even create a more flooding problem. And they said, well, it's in the plan that they're going to drain it to Yorktown Road. But we don't have any ditches at all on the side of our road from Walden Road all the way down to Sweet Bay. There's not a culvert. Everybody's driveway is leveled to Yorktown Road. Unless the city's going to come in and trench everybody's front of their house and put in culverts, there's no drainage. Now, on the other side of Yorktown, there is a large drain, which I've lived in Flower Bluff all my life. The only time that drain is actually totally filled up was Celia. It filled that drain to where the roads were actually not able to get around the culverts. They filled the culverts up and came out on the roads. But I don't know how they're going to get the water across that road unless they tunnel underneath or something, and there's nothing on this side. So I think they've messed up on their drainage plan on this road. And what's traditional in this area, and the reason we bought where we did, is most all of the houses from Sweet Bay all the way to the Oso have multi-acres. And I'm not just talking one. Some of them, I think his is about the only one with a single acre. Everything else is 5 acres, 10 acres. We've got 13 back where we are. My sister's got 5 on hers. So traditional, we're looking at multi-acre properties. Thank y'all.
Thank you for your comments.
Hello, my name's Lenora Golke. I live at 500 Yorktown also, and we are directly behind this division that is supposed to be developed. My question is, we have the paperwork for that they've been doing all these studies on, and they said that they addressed the stormwater situation, and that obviously it's so minimal that it's no concern. It's right here on the paper. I hate to tell them that it is a concern. This is the acreage that is out there. This is the 9-acre plot that is out there. I have a stack of pictures here. It's all underwater. We are directly behind them. So we also get to share in the fun. We are underwater. My yard is underwater. We have 13 acres. How can you put 13 acres underwater? We are all underwater. The people next, let's see, my sister-in-law lives next door to us, and we have people that live behind us. The road going to them is underwater. Her house has water flowing through behind it. And the people in the front, this is theirs. They've never flooded. And we have the water coming across the road and flooding from this place, from the acreage. And I don't know how they're going to plan on keeping this amount of water that is still, if you went by there right now, there's still water there. There's still water behind us. There's nowhere for it to go. And for it to go into that drainage ditch across from us, I do not know how they're going to do that. And our land goes behind them and it slopes. So their water is going to come to us no matter what they do. I just don't know what they're going to plan on doing. If we get drowned out, I don't know who's going to help us. So, thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Hi, Hi, I'm Sharon Goki. I live at 500 Yorktown A. That's B. We have C. There's 3 people that share the same address. And I wanted to address too the flooding. That is the property, and she showed a picture of it also. The drainage ditch that is huge on the opposite side of the road, it captured a car in it. You couldn't tell the difference between Waldron Road and Yorktown where the ditch was and the road ended. All of Waldron Field, the base, is up here. It drains down and runs into here. They've allowed a storage unit, and my hand's shaking. The storage unit, they have boat storage now. So all of this runoff is really overusing this drainage ditch. In front of my daughter's house, 508 Yorktown, from Waldron Road to her house is flat ditch. From her road, this is their field, that they're the new addition. There is no ditch whatsoever. There's no difference between where Yorktown Road leaves off and the property goes. This is the section directly after it where those people's houses are. Here's Yorktown Road, and there is no ditch, no way a ditch could be there between those high lines and Yorktown Road. This is the section right after that. There is no way a ditch could be in there. This is where Flower Bluff Fire Department is. The ditch just starts there, and this is what their little ditch is. There's no room between Yorktown Road and those people's houses to put a ditch into that. So we do have a drainage issue, and I've lived there all my life in that area and saw those 2 planes crash, and very close to my house when I lived there. And I was very good friends with the monastery of St. Clair when those nuns were suggested to leave because the base made it not inhabitable, and they had to relocate to Brenham because of the flight pattern that they were in also. So I hope y'all will relook at drainage issues as well as safety, because somebody have to be held accountable for when those planes crash in that 48 houses, 100+ people. It was bad enough. I have the 5 acres, 10 acres in front of me, and it crashed right there. The plane was able to miss the house by a couple of feet that they lived by. So, thank y'all.
Thank you.
Yes.
I just have a question. When was those pictures taken?
Today,
Oh, today. Okay.
not this one. That was during the rain. These pictures, did y'all want them?
No, I just want to know when it was taken.
Oh, these I took today driving home, and I went, y'all need pictures of the ditches, that there is none.
The water one is mainly what I was wondering.
Oh, that one was about the heavy rain that we had last
Okay.
week.
Just want to make sure. Thank you.
Yeah. It still has water flowing. It still does.
Thank you.
Thank y'all.
Anybody else wishing to comment?
Good evening. I'm Joe Kramer. I am the current president of the Flower Bluff Citizens Council. I am here on behalf of Flower Bluff as a whole. I am begging and asking y'all to really put in some homework and some consideration into this. Every time we keep poking a pin at the naval base, it gives them another reason to consider, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but in the future of pulling out. If the base pulls out, CCAD will not survive. They will leave as well. And we're not talking about just a few hundred homes of people. We're talking about thousands of jobs. We're talking about the survivability of Corpus Christi. That is a big, big consideration that I'm asking y'all to please consider. David was very right in all of his history that he has done and the facts that he has done, looking at Pollock, the main guy at the base, getting that information. The other part of this is drainage. Since Corpus Christi annexed Flower Bluff back in the 60s, their main consideration of Flower Bluff was we are going to work on the drainage in Flower Bluff. Flower Bluff has always had drainage issues. They have never been fixed or taken care of properly. It's always been a Band-Aid patch. It has gotten a little bit better in the last year or two, but the drainage that they're having is gonna be worse if the subdivision goes in. Because like they were saying, there is nowhere else for that water to drain but into the surrounding properties. The car wreck that you saw there, that car, I don't know how well you saw that picture, but that is amazing. That car was almost completely underwater because you couldn't see the road. Now, I understand that was they're calling that a 5-year rainstorm. And I think right now the design is for a 5-year rain stormwater instead of a longer period of time. But the drainage in the bluff has always been a concern. And by adding this much concrete and this much material in there that's not going to absorb the rain, it's not going to absorb the drainage, it has nowhere else to go but other landowners. And again, I just say, please put your consideration into what the naval base is asking. We cannot lose the base. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Robert Gerlach, and I'm going to be very brief. I'd like to cede my time to my son.
We cannot do that, unfortunately.
Really?
Yes, sir. We've tried. Mr. Buck, you want to comment to that?
No, each speaker gets 3 minutes.
We've tried before. Sorry.
Well, I guess about the only thing that I can talk about is to reiterate the issue with the air station and the Navy. I'm a retired Army officer, an aviator, and I've dealt with those folks, obviously, for my whole career. You don't want to poke pins in the commander of Naval Air Training here, because he'd rather be in Pensacola, be honest. They change, but the point is that this is a crash zone that calls for low-density housing, if any housing at all. And that ought to really be your main consideration, because the Navy's gone on record with the city. Now, if there's a BRAC, and I'm not saying there's going to be another one, but let's face it, we have a Democratic administration that's very keen on social programs now, and they're looking for funding. And the quickest, easiest place to get funding is out of the defense budget. So what's the future hold? I don't know. But bear in mind that CCAD is a tenant organization on Naval Air Station Corpus Christi. They're a renter. And if the guy that owns the building, the Navy, shuts the building down, what's going to happen to the renter? They're out. The Army is not going to move in there at their expense and take that base over. Just not going to happen. So that's just one more thing to add on to the flooding issues. I mean, we get hurricanes, we get tropical storms. This was a 5-year rain event, fine. What's a tropical storm going to be when it dumps 10 inches in a day? The flooding's going to be bad. And I don't think that it's fair for these people that live there now, that have invested in their homes there, to be put in jeopardy because somebody wants to make more money off of more houses in a small area. So that's that.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jean Blakesley, and my husband Jim, and we're at 517 Yorktown Boulevard, which is 30 feet from the edge of that development, or the intended development. And I wanted to say that that property was on the market for about 6 years, and it wasn't bought by anybody else because of it being this APZ2 rated. And so this company purchased it with this APZ2 with knowledge, and then submitted a plat disregarding, the information that they had. And so I think that needs to be taken into account. As far as the water is concerned, I did some calculations of how much water would be coming off, because I know that they submitted dig under under the street and to shed into the ditch on the opposite side of the street. But from the 2 inches that we just received just recently, they'd end up having like 380,000 gallons of water that would come off of it. And in May just of this year, we had 8 inches. So that means that ditch would have to be able to hold 1,520,000 gallons of water. And so I think that needs to be seen by the city first to see if it would be able to, because to be able to hold it and move it into the canal and out, because right now it's still like under construction. They're doing construction there, and the last time we had the 2 inches, it was almost overflowing. And if it did overflow into Flower Bluff Drive, into Yorktown Drive, even just the front of that proposed subdivision, it would cost the city over $2 million to fix the street there. And so for the welfare of the city and for public welfare, I think that it should be tabled until it could be looked at a little bit closer, because in the plat itself, I think the 6,000 square foot lots are supposed to have 50-foot frontages, and yet 10 of the plats that they have, 10 of them, which is 20% of that platting, is less than 50 feet. And some of them are even 40 feet, which I think is inconsistent with the requirements, even though it's being presented. And of course, we're concerned because all the water that's coming to our property, in the back of our property too, but that's the least of it. We're more concerned with how it's going to affect Yorktown as a whole. Thank you.
Any other comments at this time? All right, seeing none, we will close the public, I apologize. Will you please read those in? Yes, that's correct.
Once again, for the record, David Stallworth, Senior Planner, and I'd like to introduce the following letters, public comment that were received by us before the meeting. It should be noted that of the letters that I have here, there are 3 of them. One belonging to James and Jean, or actually 2 of them belong to James and Jean Blakely. The next one being from Sharon Golke Kratz. Those 2 women had already presented their comments at the podium at this time. So it's your decision whether you want me to read it into the record or not.
They've already spoke.
That is correct.
No, we'll forego those to the next one.
So I'm going to proceed with, you should have something in your packet. The first being a petition that consists of 29 signatures. And the header reads as follows: to the honorable members of the Planning Commission of the City of Corpus Christi, a petition of the undersigned residents of Corpus Christi, Texas, argument. We, the undersigned, all residents living within 1/2 mile of the subject property, object to the proposed development of the property known as 557 Yorktown Boulevard, also proposed as Yorktown Heights subdivision, into RS6 residential lots. It does not fit the character of the area and the surrounding zoning, is counter to the city zone development plans of the area, and is within the flight APC zones of NAS Waldron Field, which the city has agreements with to limit development to the standards laid out in the Joint Land Use Study, also known as JLUS. We respectfully request the property owner's request for platting and subdivisions for anything less than RS22 density be denied. And I believe you already have a copy of the petition and all that as well. So, moving on to the next letter, which has some highlighted points of the meeting agenda, with an accompanying letter from Miss Vicki Davis, dated 7/21/21, to this, which states as follows: I am opposed to the building development on Yorktown Road. The next item I have is an email that was addressed from Catherine Garza. It was forwarded from Catherine Garza from staff, and it came from Miss Lydia Tardif. and it says as follows. I am protesting the above planning to build 48 new houses directly across Yorktown from my residence at 3850 Casablanca Court. My husband had our house built because of the space and quietness it provided us as we retired. Now, this new development is totally from our guidelines that we had to adhere to. For example, minimum of 2,000 square foot home. What has changed? There has not been any notice for zoning change. It appears to myself and our neighborhood, as well as other properties, that our quietness will now be a thing of the past, as well as cluttering our area so that a developer can squeeze as many houses as possible to line their pockets. I'm sure that the developer does not live in a crowded area like what they are wanting to develop at the cost of congested traffic on the two-lane road on Yorktown. When did the guidelines change? Did the city planning group do their job and investigate what was already in place and whether or not this squeezed-in development is allowed in the MBR construction companies and city of Corpus Christi guidelines with the military, similar properties, etc.? Will our taxes be adjusted in accordance with the square footage that the MVR company is charging? That concludes this letter. The next one is in form of a public comment form that is from Ms. Kristen Wilkinson at 3849 Casablanca Court. Our home is located on the corner of Casablanca Court and Yorktown Boulevard, directly across from the proposed Yorktown Heights subdivision. I'm concerned about the application to plat 9.15 acres to construct 48 single-family structures. Item 3, case number 21PL1051. Most families in the vicinity selected their homes based on the existing neighborhoods, larger lots, minimal traffic, proximity to the coastline, and connection with nature, in parentheses, land, trees, shorebirds, coastal wildlife, in parentheses. The proposed subdivision will compromise the integrity of surrounding neighborhoods. Increased traffic from 48 additional homes in the limited space will impact the condition of adjacent roads. In addition, proposed changes do not appear to align with the Flower Bluff Area Development Plan, or ADP, as approved June 22nd, 2021. The proposed subdivision appears to fall in a low-density residential area as described in the ADP. Please take time to thoughtfully consider the impact on the surrounding Flower Bluff families. Respectfully, Kristen Wilkinson. End of this correspondence. The next public comment form comes from Ms. Darlene Cockrell, and it's twofold. It also contains a handwritten letter, and also contains an article from, I guess, the Caller Times. So I'll have that circulated so y'all can go and take a look at that as well. Her address is 501 Yorktown Boulevard. I am against this company's proposed building 48 houses on 9.15 acres, or correction, 9.158 acres, as my concerns were listed in my email to platapplications@cctexas.com dated July 5th, 2021. I replied to the public hearing notice I received in the mail. D. Cockrell, 501 Yorktown Boulevard, and her phone number is listed as well. Dated July 5th, 2021. In re, meeting on Wednesday, July 21st, 2021, to consider MVR Construction Company's proposed plat number 21PL105, Planning Commission of Corpus Christi. I had to think long and hard before writing this letter for fear of reprisal, but considering I am an 85-year-old cancer patient with COPD, what have I got to lose? My back 4+ acres abuts Kaufman Road, just across from this planned subdivision. When my brother-in-law desired 1¼ acres of the back acreage, we were told we had to have a 40-foot front paved, guttered, and curbed street for utilities to be provided. So he took 1¼ off the front of my acreage. I have had the same acreage as plat number 21PL1051 is proposing to build 48 homes. How does he plan to do this on 9.158 acres? Tell me how 48 homes with 40-foot wide streets can be built on this amount of land. It's not feasible. You would think, you would be in each other's front doors. It frightens me because Flower Bluff may be considered Corpus Christi, but as you well know, we are the poor stepchild. After living here for 30+ years and watching the growth, I can tell you that the utilities cannot stand the load. Our water system provider our water system provides us very low pressure already, and I can just imagine how this will impact the wastewater system. We have the best rated school system in Corpus Christi. What impact will it have on it? There are new subdivisions on Flower Bluff Road, and more being built is another on Yorktown, going to force us back to using well water on outdoor toilets. I realize that this is a housing shortage, and the contractors are eager to build as many houses as they can. Well, the market is hot, but there is not enough acreage for what this man has planned. Is it, correction, I'm reading from handwriting here, so my apologies here. If it were 5 or even 10 hours, I don't believe this would be there, or there would be complaints, but 48, give me a break. I cannot attend a meeting concerning this matter as per my doctor's orders, but wanted to voice my opinion for all it's worth. Please, persons as on the Planning Commission, think long and hard about what this man has submitted for such a small plot of land and deny his application for plat number 21PL 1051. Sincerely, D. Cockrell. End of that. And meanwhile, I'll go and pass this out for circulation. The next one is a public comment input form. Again, for Darlene Cockrell. I'm against this. I think I already read this. My apologies. So that completes the correspondence here. Are there any questions?
Any questions for staff? Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, at this time, I will close the public hearing and entertain comments from staff, or from Planning Commission. Commissioner Miller?
Okay, I need some help going down memory lane, and hopefully Andrew can help me. When was this RS6 zoning approved?
That would have been the annexation of Flower Bluff in 1961.
So, but are the adjacent properties RS6 as well?
There are some that are RS6, there are some that are FR, and some that are RE, which is the 1 acre residential estate.
Okay. And so the reason why staff and TRC essentially is recommending approval is, but for the simple fact that that property was already previously zoned RS6.
Correct. The zoning entitles the owner to those rights of that land use.
And has there been any previous attempts by previous owners of that parcel to plat it in any way, shape, or form into a subdivision?
There have not. It is unplatted land.
Okay. The thing that one of the comments that jumped out at me was, and you know, I have no way of verifying this, but that there had been, you know, previous people that were interested in that land that were not interested in or backed out of deals or did not purchase the property with the understanding that that property could not be developed based on the Navy's objections to medium or high density residential in that area.
So high-density residential would require rezoning, which would involve a discussion with the Navy, much like you've seen many rezoning cases that are in the Flower Bluff area. In this case, the property already had the appropriate zoning. Of course, if they wish to have a higher density of, let's say, single-family to something like RS 4.5, that would come before this body as part of that rezoning process. In this case, the developer remained to stay with the RS 6 design, the minimum of 6,000 square foot lots.
Okay. But basically, if this was if let's say it was currently zoned farm rural and we were dealing with a zoning case right now,
Whole other ball of wax.
TRC would be recommending denial of.
We would first have to get through the rezoning. So anytime we have concurrent processes, we typically recommend as staff to an applicant, go ahead and get your zoning solved first, because if your zoning isn't solved, there's no point in platting the property.
Right.
So that is why that case would have originated here before we even got to the phase of what the lot size will be.
Okay. Because, you know, typically, everybody knows me. I'd be jumping up and down right now, trying to convince this body to deny a zoning change. But unfortunately, we have in a pre-existing zoning of an RS6 in this area. So technically, as I raised my hand and swore an oath as a planning commissioner for the city of Corpus Christi, if the proposed development complies with the zoning, the current zoning, I have an obligation to approve this.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner York.
Thank you. Question for staff. Obviously, staff is recommending approval, so you're saying it meets the ordinances, but I do have a question on I understand that the ACUs is they're all just recommendations, but there is something, as I understand it, that limits the density if you're in the ACU zone, which a part of this property is. How does was that reviewed, considered in staff's review, and how does that affect the density here? Because the density, it says maximum 1 to 2 units per acre, but I'm assuming this is more than that.
Correct. The RS6 is roughly about 7 dwelling units per acre. It was considered during the TRC process, and of course we had discussions with the staff liaison for the Navy. And within that, it's very similar to what Commissioner Miller brought up. The zoning of the property protects and entitles that owner to those uses. It's difficult after the fact to say, even though you have the legal right to do this, we're somehow going to negate that or after the fact. So yes, the Navy, of course, will stand by the recommendation of 2 units per acre or less. But in this case, unless the city comes in and against the owner's wishes rezones their property, which in some forms could be constituting a taking, it would be difficult for us to limit the development capacity, the density of that property based on what zoning guarantees them.
Understood. Thank you.
Commissioner Dibble.
Andrew, just a quick question. I guess this property was annexed in 61, and has it had that zoning since 61?
Yes, in this area of Flower Bluff, there have only been 2 major rezonings. That zoning that occurred in 61 at the time of annexation, and then a second area-wide rezoning for most of the bluff happened in 1983 as part of the adoption of the original area development plan. So this zoning has been in place since the 60s. There hasn't, the policy at the time was whenever land was annexed in the 60s, instead of today where we apply the FR zoning, it was then applied as single-family zoning, since that was the typical use that expanded on the edge of the city.
And then whenever a new land use or land study is done, for an area, and you have existing zoning that's contrary to the recommendation in the land use map or the new land use map, what process happens there? Is the existing zoning grandfathered in, or does a new land use study trump what the old zoning was?
I wish it was that simple that land use could just flip a switch and change zonings, but the zoning that is in place today is what states. It's the rights that are given to that property owner. Now, at that point, we have limited options. Either we can appeal to the owner to ask for a change of zoning to get them to the right spot based on ACUs, or we as a city would then have to force a property owner to change zonings. And in some cases, that's where you've heard in the media about land swaps and the Navy purchasing properties or taking properties off the market on these clear zones of the ACUs. That is a tool in the toolbox. But I think using tools like the JLUS, the Joint Land Use Study, that is where we as the city would have to come in and start rezoning properties. And that may have a negative impact to certain property owners because we're limiting now the rights that they had guaranteed by their original zoning district. So it's not going to be a simple process. It's doable, but it's not simple.
And then there was lots of questions and concerns from residents about the drainage in the area.
Sure.
Talk about the process on when the technical review committee looks at that. Are they looking and saying, hey, they have a good drainage plan in place? Has that already been reviewed, or?
Yes, so as part of the study by the Technical Review Committee, of course, all of our partners in the Utilities Division of Public Works will analyze water, wastewater, and storm. Stormwater, in this case, there was a preliminary utility plan submitted with the plat that shows an underground system for this development to bore under Yorktown Boulevard and then outfall into the ditch on the north side of Yorktown. Now, that's the paper version, so to speak. Once a plat is approved, then it enters into what we call the public improvements phase. That is when a second set of civil engineer drawings are submitted. That is the official review of that stormwater system, how it's going to be constructed. That's when inspections come into play. Until that is accepted and approved and then accepted for city maintenance, that development cannot move forward. Just no different than laying a water line. If the city doesn't accept the water line, that development stops.
And then I guess the major difference of what's happening with drainage now versus, if they develop this subdivision is the fact that now there's going to be a water transfer, which can't happen now because they're boring underneath it. And so in theory, a lot of this drainage that's running onto adjacent properties or ponding or whatever's happening over there may get alleviated. And I guess part of that process, you look at what the capacity of the drainage ditch is across Yorktown and make sure that
Correct.
there's room for the water to go.
As part of public improvements, that is where you'll hear things like SWIFT permits and pollution prevention plans and true stormwater quality management plans. That is where we determine how water is flowing on the site. Of course, in the state of Texas, it's illegal to drain your water onto someone else's property. So that water has to stay on site. It has to meet the pre and post calculations to make sure the system can absorb that level of drainage. Otherwise, the landowner may have to augment the system to handle that drainage. But all of that is the hydrology calculations that are part of that public improvement plan.
Right, because a new development cannot impact, most of these citizens came up and talked about the fear that this development is going to flood out my site, right? So what Andrew says is when the public improvements are submitted, right, they have to mitigate that this development can't impact the neighbors around them. They can't, right? So if the ditch is not sufficient, that developer will have to widen it or come up, or maybe even detain on site. So what we see here in the plat is the paper version, as Andrew said, but what actually gets built that will work so that in theory, these guys shouldn't even know the development is there other than just looking at the houses going, oh my gosh, there are 48 houses there. But it shouldn't impact their life, and that's kind of what the public improvements do, so.
Thank you.
Commissioner Zarguni.
Okay. I have several concerns or questions. To Vice Chair Dipple's point, my concerns is about drainage. So obviously, this is a continuing issue, and the question keeps coming up as far as the residents throughout the town concerned about these developments opens up, and the drainage issues is not being truly addressed. The developer developed the subdivision, sells the lots or the houses to people, and then when the rain comes in, people complain, who needs to fix it? City blames the developer, developers blame the city. Where does this, and I'm asking it because obviously my duty here tonight, I want to make sure we provide an assurance first for our residents that these developments are accurately designed properly, that as our city growing, this issue does not become continuous. And I'm not, of course, an engineer by all means, but I have no doubt that the development service and the technical department reviews this and carefully analyze it. But we've had several rains in the last couple of weeks, and we will continue to have that. And this is not the first concerns we will have, it will not be the last. And it's really becoming a huge concern. I actually had a meeting with the city council this afternoon about this, and he was talking about the same thing, that we've got to step up and figure out the solution, that these developments really are considered to a worst level of kind of situation when we get severe rain, 6-7 inch of rain, that nothing shuts down, right? And this particular development at this time, are those factors considered, that if we have some, severe rain, are these residents are going to struggle, or this going to be an issue, and then everybody's going to kind of blame others? So that's my first concern, if I get some clarification on that.
Sure. So a stormwater quality management plan, the calculations required are for a 5, 25, 50, and a 100-year events. So that is to show the impact to the system based on that level of precipitation. Now, depending on as you go downstream, if those facilities are able to absorb, as Al mentioned, that is where the second half of the public improvement review starts. So just because you have a drain that's 6 inches wide, obviously if down the road's a 3-inch pipe, the water's going to back up. So very similarly, When those public improvements are submitted and reviewed, we would look at the impact to the overall system. Can the drainage coming off of this site at a minimal event, like a 5-year, can the facility down the road that a city maintain absorb that level along with everything else that is assigned to that drainage basin?
But could it also be considered, if I may recommend at least, that when designs are developed and implemented in such that just don't look at the normal situation of it? What if we get, God forbid, a severe or serious kind of rain issue that kind of protects us from, you know what I mean, complete shutdown? Is that something that has been considered in proposing
And
developments?
that's an excellent point. We're in the midst of a master plan for the stormwater master plan, I should say. That is where we're discussing items like low-impact development and alternative types of materials that we can use to keep water more on site. And that way you're reducing the amount of capacity that's eventually going to end up in the system. So you have to start somewhere, and usually you start at the micro level. What is the site that's beginning, the origin point of water? And then if you get enough of those lots to use things like low-impact development, you can reduce the amount of outfall that's eventually going to end up in the system, which makes room for other projects to then have that availability of space.
Gotcha.
So yes, it is definitely at the forefront of our thoughts.
Okay, my next question is, I understand, Mr. Demis, you said that this property was zoned in 1961, long time ago.
Been a few years.
Been a few years. And I understand that in terms of the property owner right, because they have an RS6, they're complying with what they can do, right? But my concern is the safety of residents because of the fact that the Navy, excuse me, has indicated that this is in a crash zone. I mean, it is in an AQs and recommending a 1 to 2 dwelling per acre of it, right? I'm not trying to make this more complicated, but my question is that what if, I understand the developer wants to develop the property of it, but what about the safety of the families? I mean, I don't know how many proposed lots they're having in this subject property,
Well,
45, 47?
It's about 48 lots.
45. Is there any recommendation or plan that we could discuss this with Navy? I mean, my thing is, and I'll be honest, is what if this kind of is severe emergency happens in a crisis zone? We're talking about people's families, death, and severe issues of it. And is there something that we could potentially, I don't know, I mean, table this to get some clarifications? Again, I'm all for the growth and support of the development, but at the same time, this is a huge concern that what does our duty as a planning commission do? Yes, do we approve it, but what about the future with, God forbid, an issue arise? Is anybody responsible for that, or anybody that
I would say, as a planner, we dance a very fine line. Of course, Texas is a property owner state.
Sure.
And of course, life, safety, and welfare of all citizens is our first duty as city officials. But there is a fine line between protecting property rights and taking property rights. So we have to be very cautious when I mentioned about city-initiated rezonings, that where is the threshold that we stop to say, okay, this is now a safety issue? Obviously, our accident potential zones are an easy one. But if you have areas that constantly flood, is that another one? Or if we have an area that is posed to some other risk, like we have in the parks areas that have more of a higher bacterial count, is that another one? At what point do we start now taking properties, and now that definition of what justifies the taking of that property becomes a little more vague? So that is why the Navy is more than happy to provide recommendations, but ultimately the zoning protects the rights of that property owner. And that's where the legal area comes into play. We don't want to infringe on anyone's rights. We can recommend as much as we would like, but we can't take those rights away from that property. No different than one of my neighbors or my property could take my property rights away from me.
And definitely that's not what I was trying to say, not taking their right. I was just talking about more of their safety concern, knowing that there's a, pretty high level of risk involved there. It was the discussion a couple of weeks ago about the property on Saratoga where the school is, right? So these things are something that at some point, obviously, like you said, safety of people and families are our high priorities. And with approving such things, those considerations need to be discussed, but obviously you answer the questions, and thank you. Clarify that.
Absolutely.
Andrew, I have a clarification.
Yes,
They
sir.
mentioned a comment about the setbacks on this one, maybe not adhering to RS6. Has that been reviewed? Are we sure that those are all?
Yes, so the minimum lot width for properties in R6 is 50 feet. Now, of course, on this plat, when I took a second look, just to make sure all those lot widths were accounted for, there are some that have the number 47, 49, one had 40. It didn't account the total calculation for the radii of a curve. So when you actually look at a plat map, you're going to have a hard line at a corner, and then you're going to have a bit of a curve for that corner clip. That corner clip provides a distance measurement, which accounts for that 5 feet. Now, the UDC itself, which is our Unified Development Code, states that we as the city can measure the ultimate lot width at the 25-foot setback line. And in analyzing this plat, all plats met the 50-foot requirement at that 25-foot setback line. So they are compliant with the code.
Okay, and then during the public improvement, if they cannot evacuate or contain the water properly, does this go back to a replat of having a, like a detention pond or anything of that nature?
So plats are good for 6 months. If the public improvement plans cannot be resolved within those 6 months and some form of forward progress doesn't occur, then the applicant has two options. Either come back before this board and ask for a plat extension, a time extension, or two, their plat expires.
Perfect. My other comments, when I started this meeting or this part of it and said, what are our obligations with the legal? It's because I've sat here for years and I've had several of these that nobody up here enjoys, nobody. And we've tried to deny several of them. And Buck, I'd ask you for one more clarification. If we all do deny this, what happens next? It goes to state and state approves. And from that point, there's potential legal action back down. How does that work?
Yes, there's potential legal action, and the applicant can actually sue the planning commission and the city, and then he would take it to district court and then we would have to go to district court, and the district court would rule whether the plat is indeed compliant with law or non-compliant. And of course, if it's compliant with law, the court's going to overrule the city and the planning commission and assess attorney fees and court costs.
And my other comment, I guess, for public again is, if this was a zoning case, I don't think we'd even have a recommendation for this. I think our hands are, and I don't mean to make it sound like we don't have any options here, but the options are very clear when it comes to plats. Andrew, are there any other options? I mean, tabling and going back to the applicant, Mr. Buck, I see you pushing a button.
So under state law, the planning commission is obligated to make a decision within 30 days from the plat filing. Failure to do so, it kind of is an approval by operation of law.
So even if we do not approve, it becomes approved?
After 30 days.
After 30 days. So the only option we have is not approve it by no vote and it gets approved, or vote yes for it, or vote no and then go back to penalty of potential legality. Interesting.
We couldn't table this?
If you do in 30 days, by the time when was it submitted, Andrew? Is it from its submitting or from?
It is from our clock starts at the date we deem it complete. And that is what's consistent with what we call the 30-day shot clock in Chapter 212 of the Local Government Code. So we're pretty close to that 30-day mark. Most of the plats we get here as quickly as we can within usually about a 18-day time frame. So even if you table it, by the time we get back to Planning Commission,
it would be 30 days.
It would be 30 days.
Approved. Automatically approves. We had one come through that was just as like this plat here, where everybody was against it, and in fact, 2 or 3 people voted no for it, but it didn't matter. The majority voted yes for it, and it would have passed through.
Technically, it doesn't matter what we do.
That's correct.
Is what I'm trying to understand.
It is.
As far as the legality of it.
Correct.
Even if,
Cameron, to your point, if we have a moral objection to safety issues and things like that, presumably we could all abstain.
We can no vote. We can call for items 4 through 8, get a motion on those, ask for a motion on 3 and get no motion, and then deem, is that correct, Mr. Buck?
If you don't take any action, it'll be, like I said, it'll be approved by operation of law.
But our conscience, or Cameron's conscience, or my conscience, or anybody else's conscience can be clean.
And I guess that's kind of my point is I've seen these, and that's why I wanted to kind of explain earlier is we've tried to do the no, voting no for it to get rid of it, to put it in, you can.
And again, sorry, if I may say, my perspective is not necessary, just saying no on it. I'm just trying to find the alternate solution of it and see if, I was hoping that if we could table this, possibly have a discussion with an applicant, if they were open to some kind of a consideration, knowing that these issues are real issues. I mean, it's not something that the residents respectfully are trying to make more out of it. I mean, my concern is the safety issue with the crash zone. I mean, and it's there. And I hate to have a family or somebody go through that, but at the same time, if my hands are limited as a planning commissioner, then obviously, I guess I can't do anything about it. I mean, I was just trying to see if there is an option to have a discussion amicably
And
with
I
the.
Completely understand.
And I
It's-
do think that triggers more toward the zoning case.
Okay.
And that's where we have and that's before this typically.
You have
but
more
this was
influence in
already-
a recommendation when it comes to a zoning case that's forwarded to city council, which is a very public process, versus a
and speak to-
plat, which is more of an administrative function.
And speaking about the taking or that part of it, if we don't proceed with this, it gets approved, is the taking even an option at that point? No, I'm gonna say that's.
No, a taking would be if
Prior
if we
to.
as the city came in and said, we're going to downzone your property to RE or FR so we can limit your density. We're essentially taking property rights away from the owner that he has today. We went through this many times when the UDC was adopted, when we had uses being rearranged among the zoning districts, to make sure that the intensity of the use that we were moving to a district was equal, meaning if we moved retail and office to a different district, but they were able to still have multifamily, they still have a quote-unquote highest and best use for the property. We weren't taking value away from the property.
And at what stage is that prior to getting to a plat, obviously? Or
Yes, that would be far before plat. I would say items like this would definitely come up as we craft our new UDC text amendments of if we want to put an out in there that says if you exist in one of these zones, then you have to follow X process. But that's for future cases.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
I have a question. Obviously, 1961, respectfully, is way where I was even born. And at that time that this zoning was done, was there any such rules and regulations regarding Navy exist, or no, it came afterwards?
The ACUs did not exist until 1985.
Okay. And there hasn't been any attempt in regarding to develop this property since 1961 or anything that
It
you
has
know?
been vacant property from aerials going back to 56. It has been vacant property.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Miller.
Do they, whenever this goes for the final plat, or for the construction, goes towards construction,
Yes, sir.
and they provide their stormwater study, what is development services, do they confirm all the calculations, or do they rely on the civil engineer?
A little bit of both. So very much, if you can imagine an old-style newspaper office, you had a writer and then you had an editor. Our job is more of the editing role. The engineer that submits the plan set signs and seals saying, I attest under my license that this meets the appropriate calculations. Our job in development services is to verify, yes, this is correct. And that is where, especially in a case like this, where we know there may be some contention, we would reach out to our partners in stormwater to validate, have an extra step of review just to be safe. But yes, we do double check the numbers, so to speak. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it is the engineer who is signing and sealing as that engineer of record is responsible to ensure that those calculations and that design is ultimately built.
And is there a mechanism, because 2 weeks ago we had a civil engineer in here that the hydrology calculations for Kings Landing, right?
Engineers never disagree.
Yeah. That's fine. So is there a mechanism for a certain group of citizens or anybody to have a peer review of, somebody submitted calculations?
Once submitted, all documents are public record. So if someone is to file a open records request, and they want a copy of the stormwater quality management plan, any plans are submitted, our obligation is to release those plans.
But technically speaking, if it's past TRC at that point, there's no mechanism for a civil engineer with a conflicting say, no, you got it wrong, and here's the reasons why, and
Well, TRC is essentially more like a preliminary step. They look at the plat as a whole. When we get to the public improvements, definitely our Engineer 5 looks at them, and then at this point, we would pull in assistance from our utilities department and Storm Mr. Hinojosa to make sure that he concurs with our analysis that definitely the calculations are met and the system can indeed absorb what the engineer of record is proposing.
A group of concerned citizens could provide their own engineer saying, we feel that this is incorrect.
I'm sure you can submit comment, no different than we receive emails from the public every day. It's not in the bubble system that, we don't take comment from anyone outside. If there are concerned folks that want to contact our partners in both in DSD and other departments, they are free to do so. We are public servants first and foremost.
Well, I guess my main concern is, so with my knowledge of how civil engineers operate and how their professional liability insurance and firms over there's no offense against you, but they're typically limited. Let's say there is a rain event and all these folks get flooded, right? And then, here comes the developer and the city pointing at each other. Inevitably, it's going to go fall back on the civil engineer. And the civil engineer is going to have a professional liability insurance policy that's limited to whatever the size of his contract was. So let's say he got paid $50,000 to design this stormwater. That's the only thing that is it. They're all flooded. So, I guess what I'm getting at is, it would be nice if there was a way for, if we had concerned citizens, that that one engineer's assessment of the potential runoff implications, and numbers aren't supposed to lie, but, sometimes.
Well, there's an old saying that 47% of statistics are made up.
Commissioner, the public improvement process is that once the construction inspection group says, hey, this is 75% complete, so the plat could be recorded, or 100% complete finally, the city inherits it. So you mentioned that there's a finger pointing contest, but it's the city's infrastructure then. In theory, as Andrew is saying, when something is really heated like this, we bring in Public Works and our guy, and we're looking at it to make sure that it is accurate and it is correct. However, we get emails every day from people challenging what we do, and we look at it. We don't blow them off. We look at it and we respond to the email saying, oh yeah, thanks for bringing that to attention, or maybe you're a little off here or whatever. So we're challenged every day, but it's our job to make sure that the infrastructure we inherit does what it's supposed to do in the end.
So ultimately, the city is.
Absolutely.
For maintenance, correct.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Commissioner Dibble.
Just out of curiosity, is some of the city staff that reviews this actually licensed engineers themselves?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so there
In
really
Public
is
Works and in Development Services, yes.
Okay, so when we would say city staff, these are licensed people that, I guess have certificates or whatever that are probably commensurate with the same people that are submitting these drawings.
They're almost as smart as Michael York, yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Salazar Garza.
Yes, okay, so this property seems to be a very big concern, not only for the safety of the people, but for the flooding. And since you mentioned earlier about the master plan that the city is in the process of doing.
Yes, ma'am.
I think I've heard that previously, so can you tell me a little bit about when this process is going to be?
Sure. So as part of our grand rollout of, I would say, our evolution towards impact fees, the first place we needed to start is having master plans, and that is going to cover water, wastewater, storm, roads. All of them tie into each other at one form or another. I would say my personal favorite is stormwater, and the reason for that is I'm a big proponent of low-impact development. That is the way we can minimize impacts of water, and then we can reduce the amount that ends up going into the system. So that stormwater master plan, which will cover from Cal Island to the island, all areas of City of Corpus Christi, of ways that either drainage needs to be improved or tools in our toolbox, so to speak, of how we can reduce impacts to the system. So it's a little bit of, yes, you need to make the ditch a little bit bigger, but in other cases, it's you need to reduce the impact so this ditch can now absorb a little more without having to widen it. No different than we've done with roads with things called smart sizing, where we can take the same amount of right-of-way, but we may narrow lane widths to now pick up a bike lane or to be able to put in a wider bicycle sidewalk. There's different tools in the toolbox that we can apply as part of that master plan to then take that to the development community. And it's here are the tools in which you need to build your drainage system to match our plan.
Okay, so because this seems to be an issue almost all over Corpus. I live in
Of
the
course.
Calallen area, and we've got the same issues there. So I guess I just wanted, I'm just trying to find out. I'm an impatient person, so when someone tells me they're gonna come and start dredging the ditches or doing whatever it is to help my drainage flow, I'd like to know a little bit more of a time that this way I can prepare and at least know, especially when there's gonna be other building going on around the area where I live. So I'm just curious to know, I've heard about the master plan, I know there's a process because it's just going on everywhere. I'd just like to narrow it down a little bit more and pinpoint it exactly when something like
So
this is
with
gonna
every
start.
master plan, you usually have what's called an implementation matrix right behind it. You have a priority list of these are the top 10 things that need to be addressed first. As very much earlier in this meeting, you heard the CIP budget. That is when those projects come in of how funds are diverted to then take care of those top 10 items as the margins of the budget allow. So that is how then we assign what are 1 to 5 year, 5 to 10, and 10+ year schedules of short, mid, and long-term projects.
Okay. And another question. What exactly was said of the ACUs about this area as far as the safety zones?
So the Navy stands pretty much by a comment of they do not like densities greater than 2 units per acre. As I like to say, they like crops and cows. They don't want any rooftops in areas that are in what they call accident potential zones. They're very careful to use that word potentiality because it is not necessarily a probability, and only because I was corrected very much by the Navy for saying that phrase of saying it's a more probable area. And they said, hold on, it's not that it's more probable, this is a potential area because at takeoff and landing is the most dangerous time of any flight. Once it reaches altitude, it's pretty much smooth sailing. But nevertheless, as you get through these zones, the Navy will say, okay, we would like to see a little bit lower density of housing. Of course, they understand that zoning has already granted certain rights, so yes, they will make the comment because that is their task, that is their charge. But they do understand that some of these areas have already been earmarked, so to speak, by zoning to allow certain types of development. No different than if it was zoned industrial. And I'll give you a good example. We had a case maybe 5 years ago that was around International Airport, and our concern was the amount of smoke it was going to generate because it was a recycling center, and you're going to have dust and paint flakes and all types of things going into the sky. If that was going to negatively impact not only radar operations, but also flight traffic, because they're going to fly through this proverbial cloud. That is when we're able to use tools like ACUs to say, well, the use is allowed because it is an industrial use, but what types of things can the FAA give you tool-wise to then reduce? So there are certain filters you can use to reduce the amount of particulates, and that's exactly what ended up happening. So it did work out for everyone.
All right, thank you.
Any other comments for staff? Seeing none at this time, I will entertain a motion for items 4 through 8.
I'll make a motion, we approve items 4 through 8 as recommended by staff.
Second.
I have a motion and a second for items 4 through 8. All in favor, say aye.
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 Motion passes. At this time, I will entertain a motion for item 3 under new plats.
I'll make a motion, we approve item 3 as presented by staff.
Do I have a second? I will second. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. At this time, do we have a director's
So,
report?
but I didn't vote, so
Well-
I'm no voting, so how does that work?
2 to 3? So it doesn't pass, that's true. 2 to 4. We have 5, I believe is the quorum. Sorry, we voted.
It's a simple majority, so two is not enough to pass.
So the motion does not pass. Do I have a motion again, one way or the other, for item 3? Seeing none. All right, we move on from that motion and from that item. All right, moving on to director's report. We have a no vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to say, if I could, the commissioner asked about the master planning. We Council approved it on February 9th of this year. We signed the contract on March 4th of this year. We've been in the data gathering process. The timeline for delivery is 24 months, give or take a month or two, so it's going to be a while. But eventually, my job is to come to the commission and also to council with periodic updates, so you'll know where we are with the overall process. So I will certainly get that on one of our agendas here in the future. Also, I think all of you have been given this card, right? It's from the Planning Department, Uptown Corridors for Revitalization Strategy for Staples and Leopards. When it's going to be Wednesday, July 28th, where? Wednesday, July 28th from 5:30 to 7 p.m. and it'll be here in council chambers. So please, if you're available, please attend and comment. On the back of this card, the planning would like to ask you all to take the survey to give your opinion and thoughts of what you like to see for the 6 Points area. So please avail yourself to this if you can. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, I adjourn the Planning Commission and convene the Airport Zoning Commission. Can I have a roll call, please?
Chairman Ball.
Here.
Commissioner Dibble.
Here?
Commissioner Schrader is absent. Commissioner Zarguni.
Here.
Commissioner Miller.
Here.
Commissioner York.
Here.
Commissioner Gonzalez is absent. Commissioner Mandel is absent. And Commissioner Salazar Garza. Quorum established.
Thank you. At this time, I will open the public hearing for item, or for the airport zoning for general comment. Seeing none, I will close that portion and entertain a motion for approval of absences for Commissioner Salazar Garza.
So moved.
Anybody have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Motion passes. Moving on to approval of minutes. Any motions for the approval of minutes?
Make a motion, we approve the minutes.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Moving on to director's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have nothing at this time.
Thank you. That convenes our meeting for the Airport Zoning Commission.